To find out, we have to travel back, long before brain scans, long before randomized trials, to an era when placebo didn't mean cure. It meant trickery. And the first person to give it real meaning didn't realize he was setting science up for a century-long misunderstanding. The birth of placebo. In the late 18th century, the medical world looked very different. Bleeding, purging, and mercury tonics were common prescriptions. Physicians mixed remedies from superstition and guesswork, and outcomes often relied more on patient faith than pharmacology. The term placebo, from Latin for I shall please, wasn't a medical miracle. It was a polite lie. A doctor would hand a desperate patient sugar water or colored powder to calm anxiety when real treatment didn't exist. The idea wasn't to heal, but to comfort. By the 180s, placebo had become a small deception in service of bedside manner. Physicians learned that the appearance of care often mattered more than the ingredients of care. A confident diagnosis, the touch of a hand, the smell of herbs, these were the invisible components of healing. Yet medicine, obsessed with mechanistic explanations, refused to treat belief as part of biology. Placebo was an empty word, reassurance disguised as cure. That changed in 1955. Henry K. Beecher, an anesthesiologist who had served in World War II, published a paper titled The Powerful Placebo. During the war, he'd seen wounded soldiers calm after receiving saline in place of morphine. Many reported genuine pain relief. Beecher concluded that roughly 35% of patients improved when treated with a placebo. It was an astonishing claim, and it rewired the thinking of modern medicine almost overnight. Beecher's article became legendary, but also controversial. Later reanalyses showed flaws: small, uncontrolled studies, poor randomization, and selective data. The 35% figure wasn't universally replicable, yet Beecher had exposed something undeniable. Placebos could mimic drug effects on large scales. The question was not if they worked, but why. The first generations of researchers framed the placebo effect as psychological illusion. The mind, they reasoned, must be generating false sensations of relief. If a placebo worked for pain, it was because the patient told themselves they felt better, not because the body had changed. For decades, this explanation stuck. Medicine, eager to appear objective, confined placebo to the realm of trick perception. Scientists called it bias, noise, interference, anything but biology. Still, cracks appeared. In experiments on pain, researchers found that placebo-induced analgesia could be blocked by naloxone, an opioid antagonist. That meant endogenous opioids, the brain's natural painkillers, were being released. Brain scans in the 198s and 199s confirmed it. Placebo treatments activated the same neural regions as morphine. It wasn't illusion, it was chemistry. Yet paradox persisted. If the placebo effect was purely mental, why did some people experience profound physiological changes while others felt nothing? If words or rituals could summon real biochemistry, how far did that influence extend? Beecher's discovery hinted at a hidden interface between expectation and physiology, but the instruments of his time couldn't find it. By the turn of the 21st century, medicine had split into two camps. On one side, skeptics dismissed most placebo studies as artifacts of bias. On the other, neuroscientists found mounting evidence of real biological pathways driving these responses. Functional MRI, PET scans, and EEGs began mapping patterns that repeated across pain, depression, and even immune regulation. The same regions, the rostral anterior cingulate cortex, prefrontal cortex, and striatum, lit up whenever patients believed they were receiving treatment. Historians now see Beecher's paper not as flawless science, but as a provocation, a spark that forced researchers to admit the unmeasurable might still be material. His 35% estimate exaggerated the consistency of the affect, but it drew attention to something deeper: the brain's capacity to modulate its own chemistry. Medicine's greatest deception had been thinking the placebo effect was fake merely because it couldn't be patented. Like any good story, the placebo's origin is tangled with human psychology. Doctors wanted control, patients wanted hope. Both conspired unknowingly to summon a measurable biological response through theater and trust. In that sense, early medicine was already practicing a form of cognitive pharmacology. Its tools were gestures, beliefs, and ritual rather than molecules. The ethical debate that followed Beecher still shapes modern clinical design. Is it right to deceive patients, even if deception heals? In response, double-blind trials became the gold standard, designed not to understand placebo, but to cancel it out. Every new therapy had to beat belief to prove its worth. Yet in suppressing placebo as background noise, science may have buried one of the most fascinating biological systems within us. Seen with modern perspectives, the birth of placebo was less a celebration of illusion than an accidental peek into the machinery of expectation. Beecher's observations, stripped of wartime chaos and statistical errors, hinted that belief itself could alter chemistry. He couldn't explain neural circuitry or molecular messengers, but he sensed their presence, a glimpse what the next century would confirm. Healing and believing were not separate events, they were steps of the same process. Modern neuroscience now revisits what Beecher began. It turns out that our thoughts don't simply feel like medicine, they act like medicine. Placebo effects are not ghosts in the data. They're biological signals pushing through ancient pathways we barely understand. And in the years since Beecher's paper, scientists have started tracing those signals to specific neurons and brainstem circuits that carry the message of relief. That realization changes the entire story. The placebo began as polite trickery, evolved into controversial evidence, and now stands as one of the clearest examples of mind-body integration ever discovered. What used to be dismissed as imagination has become measurable neurophysiology. And this is only the beginning. Because if belief can reduce pain, maybe it isn't just creating a feeling, it's flipping switches inside the brain itself. The next chapter of the story isn't about the mind pretending. It's about neurons obeying. The hidden circuit of pain relief. Inside a lab at the University of North Carolina 2024, a team of neuroscientists was watching something impossible. Mice trained to expect a painkiller were showing clear signs of relief, but no active drug had been given. Electrodes traced tiny sparks deep within their brains, revealing a new kind of pathway. At first, it looked like noise. Then a pattern emerged. The signal repeated every time the animals expected relief. Their brains weren't faking pain reduction, they were performing it. It began in a brain region already famous for emotion and empathy, the rostral anterior cingulate cortex, or rACC. From there, neurons projected down to a structure no one had associated with pain control before, the pontine nucleus, a relay station tucked in the brainstem. When scientists traced these rACC signals, they realized they had uncovered the physical route of expectation itself. The discovery reshaped how researchers understood placebo analgesia. For decades, they had observed pain reduction without medicine, but no one could explain where in the brain that illusion turned to reality. This circuit finally closed the loop. It showed how belief moves from thought to chemistry. When subjects were told pain relief was coming, neurons in their rACC fired off instructions. Those instructions reached the pontine nucleus, which in turn communicated with the cerebellum and pain processing centers, effectively turning down the body's pain dial. The team verified the finding with ruthless precision. They interrupted the connection between the rACC and pontine nucleus. The result? The placebo affect vanished. Pain thresholds dropped back to baseline as if someone had snuffed out an internal morphine drip. Then they did the opposite, stimulated that same circuit without offering any placebo conditioning. The animals relaxed. They acted as if medicated. The brain, it turned out, could produce analgesia from signal alone. What stunned researchers next was the chemistry of these neurons. When they examined gene expression, patterns inside the pontine nucleus, they found an unusually high density of opioid receptors. That meant endogenous opioids, chemicals like endorphins that mimic morphine, were flooding the system. Expectation wasn't just whispering to the brain, it was pulling levers tied directly to the body's natural painkillers. This made the placebo effect measurable in a way no one could dismiss. Calcium imaging showed neurotransmission intensifying precisely when subjects believed they were being treated. From a purely biological view, expectation looks like a trigger that unleashes real pharmacology within the brain. You think you're getting relief, and your neurons obey that story as if it were true. But the plot thickened with a surprising accomplice, the cerebellum. For centuries, textbooks described it as a coordinator of movement and balance, nothing more. In these new studies, cerebellar Purkinje cells mirror the activity of rACC neurons during anticipated pain relief. The cerebellum, usually silent in discussions of emotion or cognition, was lighting up with belief. It didn't just control muscle movement, it modulated the sensory and emotional weight of pain. That finding threw a curveball at neuroscience itself, proving that pain isn't just a bottom-up signal traveling from nerve to brain. It's a top-down negotiation shaped by what we expect to feel. Researchers began calling the system the prefrontal cortico-pontocerebellar circuit. That mouthful describes a chain extending from cognitive control regions in the prefrontal cortex to the pontine relay, down to the cerebellum. When expectation activates this route, pain perception changes. It's a coordination of thinking and sensing so complete that separating the psychological from the physical stops making sense. The implications spread across medicine fast. If the mind can reduce pain through this circuit, then traditional painkillers might owe part of their efficacy to the expectation surrounding them. It also helps explain why identical treatments can work wonders for one person and fail for another. Differences in this neural loop may decide how strongly someone's belief shapes sensation. To be sure, laboratories have mapped other pieces of the pain puzzle before. Placebo responses were known to involve dopamine release in the striatum and modulation in the anterior insula. But that evidence felt incomplete, more correlation than causation. The rACC pathway tied everything together. It gave the placebo effect a concrete address in the brain. And perhaps more importantly, it proved that expectation wasn't a vague psychological cloud. It was an organized neural orchestra, rehearsed and repeatable. When scientists silenced this circuit, they noticed another unexpected outcome. Anxiety levels spiked. That suggests the placebo effect doesn't just relieve pain, it stabilizes emotion. We might think of it as a neural insurance policy, protecting the brain from the stress of anticipated suffering. In that way, the circuitry of placebo bridges pain, emotion, and resilience, hinting that belief is woven into survival itself. For decades, skeptics argue that placebo improvements arise from biased reporting. Maybe patients simply say they're better to please researchers, but this discovery shot down that argument. You can't fake synaptic firing or opioid release. Under a scanner, the brain tells the truth. It's manufacturing analgesia, not just reporting it. Placebo has a pulse, a pathway, and a measurable action. Beyond the lab, this line of research carries a quiet revolution. In chronic pain management, where traditional drugs often lose effectiveness, stimulating the expectation network may offer safe, side-effect-free relief. Therapies like virtual reality distraction or guided imagery already tap into similar mechanisms. Once considered psychological tricks, they may actually be engineering the rACC circuit. Yet there's an irony. The more scientists prove the placebo effect's biological reality, the harder it becomes for clinical trials to manage it. Pharmaceutical companies spend billions developing drugs that must outperform placebo controls. But if belief itself activates a full-blown neural pain relief system, then any pill, whether active or inert, competes against the brain's own pharmacy. Sometimes the body's internal laboratory wins. In the end, that 2024 discovery marked a turning point. It bridged a century-old mystery between feeling and function. What began as Beecher's wartime observation of sailing calm soldiers and now has a physical backbone, a line of neurons stitching thought directly into tissue. Belief doesn't mimic medicine. It becomes medicine through electrochemical choreography. And if that's true for pain, it begs an even stranger question. How far can belief reach? Could the same kind of circuitry, expectation paired with emotion, reshape mood, motivation, or even personality? Neuroscience thinks so. The same prefrontal regions, governing placebo analgesia, also regulate depression and anxiety. When expectation signals ripple through those networks, they might do more than mute pain. They might rewrite the architecture of how we feel. That's where the story goes next. Pain relief was just the first proof of concept, the easiest signal to measure. But as researchers trace these circuits deeper into emotional and cognitive territory, the placebo effect stops looking like a gimmick. It looks like a blueprint. The mind, given the right context, can reach into its own wiring and adjust the code. Pain fades, mood lifts, and chemistry follows command. The placebo doesn't erase reality. It edits it. And in the brain's laboratory, belief is the most precise instrument we've ever overlooked. The brain that rewrites itself. When researchers studied how belief could switch off pain, they stumbled on something even stranger. The brain wasn't just calming nerves, it was learning. Expectation seemed to teach the nervous system new patterns, as though hope itself acted like a training signal. This idea formed the backbone of what scientists now call the neuroplasticity placebo theory. The claim that belief physically rewires the brain's frontal limbic circuits, the regions that shape emotion, motivation, and decision-making. It started with depression studies. In clinical trials through the 201s and early 202s, neuroimaging teams noticed something suspicious. Patients receiving placebo pills while believing they were on antidepressants showed measurable changes in brain activity, almost identical to those taking the real drugs. The same key regions flickered on the MRI screens: the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, ventral striatum, rostral anterior cingulate cortex, and orbitofrontal cortex. These are not abstract locales. They form the brain's emotional command network, the circuitry that balances reward and regulation. When those areas synchronize, patients reported feeling better. The pattern repeated so often that researchers had to ask if placebos can normalize dysfunctional networks. How different are they from actual treatment? The correlation was undeniable. Placebo-induced improvements in mood tracked one-to-one with changes in blood flow and electrical activity inside the same circuits targeted by antidepressant drugs. In other words, when patients believed they were being healed, their brains adjusted as though they truly were. This was not imagination, it was a remodel. The frontal limbic system behaved like adaptive clay, reshaping itself around expectation. Neuroplasticity, the capacity of the brain to form new connections, was once thought to rely on learning or physical practice. Now, evidence indicated that belief, guided by context and ritual, could sculpt those same pathways. The placebo effect wasn't a phantom of psychology. It was a form of experiential training delivered through narrative. Neuroplastic scans showed another remarkable clue. The changes didn't appear in sensory areas, but in higher-order networks linked to self-reflection and anticipation. That meant the brain's idea of what should happen influenced its wiring more than the actual stimulus. Expectation became a kind of internal teacher, rewarding itself with dopamine bursts and calming anxiety circuits with endogenous opioids. It's as if the mind conducts a simulation of healing, and the brain, unable to tell rehearsal from reality, upgrades itself accordingly. Researchers began framing this as a merging of cognitive and biological processes. The brain isn't passively receiving therapy, it's performing therapy on itself. The conscious story, "This will make me better," feeds data to neural networks that execute molecular changes, synapses recalibrate, receptor densities shift, neurotransmitter ratios rebalance. In depression, that meant turning down hyperactive cell processing loops in the default mode network and strengthening control from the prefrontal cortex. Subjectively, patients feel lighter, clearer. Objectively, scanners show those loops quieting, like static fading from a signal. To test whether expectation alone could spark these changes, some studies use open-label placebos. Volunteers were told outright, "You're receiving a pill with no active drug," but studies show these can still help if you take them faithfully. Despite full disclosure, patients with mild to moderate depression improved. Their brain activity matched traditional placebo responders. Awareness didn't cancel the effect. It became part of it. The instructions themselves built the expectation. What's happening inside those neurons during this process? Evidence points to neurotransmitter cascades similar to those triggered by active medication. Dopamine surges through reward circuits, serotonin levels shift in mood centers, even noradrenaline dynamics in the locus coeruleus alter alertness and energy. From a biochemical standpoint, expectation functions as input to the same systems drugs manipulate. Downstream. The difference is that belief primes the loops from the top down rather than the bottom up. One speaks the language of meaning, the other speaks the language of molecules. The brain happens to understand both. This discovery forced medicine to confront a philosophical twist. If a doctor's words or a therapeutic ritual can reshape a patient's neurocircuitry nearly as effectively as a pharmacological compound, then communication itself becomes a biological act. Every conversation in a clinic potentially sets off cascades of neuroplastic change. Empathy acquires a measurable fingerprint on MRI. The line between neuroscience and narrative therapy blurs until they're only perspectives on the same event, the mind negotiating its own rewiring. For clinicians, this posed both opportunity and problem. Harnessing placebo mechanisms could enhance treatment outcomes, but acknowledging them threatened the defining hierarchy of evidence-based medicine. Double-blind trials were designed to erase belief from data, yet belief turned out to be part of biology. Ignoring it meant discarding a powerful therapeutic instrument hidden inside every consultation. The irony is that modern clinical design, built to isolate drug effects, routinely filters out one of nature's most fundamental repair systems. Long-term studies reveal that these placebo-driven neural adaptations can persist weeks or even months after treatment ends. They fade gradually, following patterns similar to learned behaviors, implying memory consolidation. The brain stores the experience of improvement like any practiced skill. Future expectation can then reactivate those networks more easily, a kind of optimism training embedded in synapses. This persistence also differentiates genuine neuroplastic change from temporary mood offset. If belief were mere illusion, the relief would vanish once doubt returns. Instead, scans show a slow decay curve resembling the extinction of learned fear. The biology remembers. Critics argue that such findings risk overstating placebo's reach. Not all conditions respond equally. Placebo rarely cures infections or structural injuries. Yet even here, neuroplasticity's fingerprints appear. Pain modulation, fatigue, and mood all involve cortical limbic feedback that influences immune and endocrine systems. When those pathways stabilize, secondary healing processes improve indirectly. Expectation becomes the silent partner amplifying medicine's signal-to-noise ratio. Some neuroscientists go further, proposing that the placebo effect itself is evidence of an ancient adaptive mechanism, a prediction error correction system evolved to maintain balance between brain and body. When prediction matches outcome, pleasure circuits reward the alignment. When it doesn't, discomfort flags the error. Placebo exploits this loop. Belief predicts relief, the brain delivers relief, and chemistry confirms belief. The result is a self-fulfilling homeostasis routine optimized over millennia. In depression studies, this manifests in tangible remodeling of connectivity between the DLPFC and limbic structures. Patients who respond to placebo display increased top-down regulation of emotional noise. Essentially, the brain relearns control. Therapists describe similar progress as cognitive reframing, but scanners show its literal rewiring, fibers strengthening between regions that had fallen out of communication. The placebo provides a story. Neuroplasticity provides the infrastructure. When you view the brain this way, the distinction between psychological and biological collapses. Thought and tissue are two ways of describing the same adaptive loop. The mind sets parameters. Neurons execute them through electrochemical negotiation. That's what the neuroplasticity placebo theory embodies, a continuous feedback between belief and biology that doesn't just change perception, it changes the physical organ of perception itself. So far, we've seen that expectation can mute pain through specific circuits and reshape emotion through structural adaptation. But there's a darker symmetry to this discovery. If positive expectation heals, then negative expectation can harm. The same mechanisms that recalibrate for relief can also entrench distress, forging neural patterns that amplify suffering. Medicine has a name for that inversion, the Nocebo Effect. And unlike the placebo's quiet encouragement, the nocebo is brutal, faster to learn, slower to fade. As the research shows, belief doesn't care whether it's comforting or catastrophic. The brain obeys the forecast it's given. What follows next exposes the hidden cost of expectation gone wrong and reveals how modern healthcare still underestimates imagination's chemistry.